Thank you very much, George, for the kind introduction. Hi, everyone. Very good to be here and to be speaking to real people in person. That's not something I do very often, so I hope it goes well. I just noticed, I was looking at the picture. I think my hair looks a lot better there than here because it was quite windy tonight. So I think it's probably gone around a bit. But anyway, let's get down to it. So this is a talk about a mobile app that I built over the last year. You're going to hear all about it in terms of how I built it, what's inside, and the reason I made it, a bit of the history behind it. And yeah, let's see. I can imagine that most of you are mobile developers. I don't need to ask you, maybe I ask anyway, how many have shipped apps on the stores? Yeah, more than half. So hopefully there will be something for everyone. Cool. Let's get down to it. So yeah, I've been a Flutter educator since I think about 2018, and you might have seen me on the various social platforms. And the kind of thing that I primarily do there is share tips about Flutter app development. So I try to keep them short and sweet, but useful. And I don't know if I should call it a marketing strategy or just trying to share what I learn. But I think the result of sharing those tips is that I've been able to get quite a good audience on these platforms, and it just makes me happy to know that people are finding the content interesting. So yeah, you can find me on Twitter, well, it's no longer called Twitter these days, but yeah, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Blue Sky recently as well. My main project really for all this time has been the website, codewithandrea.com. And there you can find a lot of articles, you can find Flutter courses, you can find additional resources. And this is a project that I've been running also for the last 5 years, and to date, I mean, if you told me I could get 5 million page views, when I started, I would have not believed it, but here we are, and again, really happy that people are receiving it very well. In terms of the content that I share, for the most part, is articles, courses, and those are all hosted on my site. But like I said, if you go to the socials, then you can find these kind of tips, like this one about media query, for example. And the format is pretty much this kind of thing. So I try to think of something short that people can find useful. I always create illustrations, just try to find a way to make it easier with nice images, to kind of understand what it is about and just trying to get the point across. And when I started, I think with most things, you start as an experiment. You just learn things and you start sharing them. And what I started with many years ago was just tips about the Dart language. So I guess, the various language features, this one was when they first announced all the collection if, spread operator, all those kind of constructs that were new in the Dart language 4 or 5 years ago. And I was kind of tweeting about it. It was kind of really bare bones, as you can see, but over time, I kind of evolved the style a little bit, just tried to make it a bit more visually appealing, and just try to make it nicer. Though we sadly heard that Dart macros are no longer coming, so maybe I should update this one. I guess it goes for history. And yes, I also originally started just on Twitter, and over time, I started cross-posting on LinkedIn. And it's a format that is quite portable across all those different platforms. And really, the idea there is that people ask me, how do you come up with new tips? I think when I brainstorm, a lot of it comes from what I do on a daily basis. So as I code and I stumble upon certain things, I just make a note of it and see if I can format it in a way that would be suitable for sharing on social. But other than that, it's just a case of what can I share that is, short, useful, and maybe people don't know about. And it's a format that seems to be doing pretty well. But the thing is, after creating all these tips and sharing them on social, you realize that on social they just get lost, and there's no really good place to store them. And because I was spending quite a bit of time creating them, I decided to create a GitHub repository. So that's the next logical step, right? And so I made this thing, and then you can, actually, I'm going to show you the repo over here. So the idea is, I mean, there's nothing more than Markdown to it. It's just a big Markdown table where each line is got like the tip ID, some title, some URL that you can navigate to, and then you can literally browse it directly from GitHub. I mean, this is probably not quite nicely formatted, stretched a bit too much, but you get the idea. Like just some basic text styling, image, and then because I had so many of them and I didn't have a proper client to kind of present them in an appealing way, I still wanted people to be able to navigate between the different tips. And the people at the back probably don't see this, but at the very bottom of each page, there's like a little teeny tiny Markdown table that you can use to go to the previous tip and the next tip. So if you want to browse, you kind of go through the different tips, you go to the bottom, and you can go previous or next. And that's how you navigate within this beautiful GitHub interface, isn't it? So obviously, I mean, for the time, at the time when I did it, it was okay, but at some point I really felt like I should really make a mobile app out of this. Like, what the hell, I'm a Flutter developer, like, why should I not make an app for it? So, and that's actually what this talk is about. So today, I'm gonna tell you about how the app works, some of the things that I did in preparation for the release, including, I guess, many things that may be obvious to you, maybe some other ones that you might want to consider before launching. I'll tell you how the launch went. I like to share numbers and things, so we'll see how that goes. And also some of the lessons that I learned along the way. Cool. Demo. Since this Flutter presentation is built with Flutter, thanks to Manjirtas, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, but the amazing author of Flutter Deck made this thing where you can make slides with Flutter, and that means you can embed mobile apps inside the slides. So this is actually the latest version of the app. So what you can do with it is, I'll just show you how the UI works. So you can very easily navigate between tips just by swiping left or right. I also added hotkeys recently, so you can just press left or right. That's for the web version. Then, as you'd expect, if you see an image, you want to zoom in, you can do that. I'm not going to attempt to do pinch and zoom while holding a microphone, but trust me that it works. If you see a tip that you like, you just press the icon to start it as a favorite. And then if you want to navigate, you go on this right panel. So it's just a simple list view. From here, you can toggle favorites. So you're going to see only the favorites. If you want to search for something, say, for example, Riverpod, then you're going to see, obviously, all the tips that are relevant for that. And then you can go and select them. And the two kind of views are synchronized with each other. So, oops, we don't need that. Other than that, there's tiny other little features. So if you want to get a random tip, you just click here, and it just does random of n-1 and takes you there. There's a simple settings page where you can switch between light and dark mode, some other basic features. But the essence of it is that it's, actually, I'm going to keep in dark mode, if you don't mind. The essence of it is that it's a pretty simple app, like really just tries to do one thing, and it tries to do it well. And that's kind of how I wanted to keep it. And for the first launch, I think I really like this idea of minimum lovable product, like make something that people are gonna feel good about using. Like you don't want them to be frustrated. It needs to be good enough, but it doesn't need to do everything. Just do one thing and do it well. I think that's a good way to describe it. So when I was planning out the project, I set some goals. And the first one was, I really want to ship this in 100 hours. And I was pretty adamant about it. I wanted it to be free for everyone to download. And because of that, I also decided it had to be free to operate. And what I mean by that is, I wanted to build it without a backend, didn't want to have any recurring costs, none of that stuff, free to use and free to run. So that was the idea. And I wanted to see also if I could use it to drive some traffic to my website. So Along with that, when you set the scope, you also need to decide what you're not going to do. One thing that I would have liked, and honestly, I think it would have been very beneficial, and I still haven't got around to it, is doing deep links, because it's such a natural thing that you browse through the tips, and if each one of them can be identified by a URL, then that makes it easier for people to share with friends and hopefully more engagement. But yeah, that was off for version 1. And so was tablet and desktop support, which I only got around to implementing a few weeks ago. I mean, I could have spent time building things like user comments, notifications, categories, all sorts of things. But I think I just wanted to be clear about the scope. And I think it's always good to ship something just to see if there's value in it. And then you can improve it if people like it. Right, let's start getting a little bit more technical. So now I'm going to tell you how the app actually works. And the core of it is that there are 4 stages. The first one is essentially fetching the data from GitHub. And by data, I mostly mean Markdown files and images. Then there is a pre-processing stage, which is necessary because in the raw Markdown, there are some things that I put there for convenience. I guess it's kind of metadata, which is there, but I don't want to visualize it in the UI. So I'll show you what that looks like. I wanted the app to be available offline for everyone. So if you go for a walk in the woods and you forgot tip 123, I want you to be able to go and see what that was. So yeah, that's that. And also at the end is obviously rendering. So once you have the data and you need to show it, how do you render Markdown? I'll talk about it, but that's actually pretty easy to do. And yeah, one thing to notice is that all the processing is done on the client. And yeah, I'm going to talk about a potential alternative to introduce server-side logic to this. But as it stands, the app is completely client-side. So, and I think a good way to explain how it works is to start by where is the data coming from. So the GitHub repository essentially is one README file. Then there's a tips folder, and inside one folder for each tip. So the README contains this Markdown table where you can grab the ID, the title of each tip, and the URL, and also these social links, but I don't need them for the client app. And then inside each tip, you'll find an index.md, and usually some images, which can be PNGs or maybe GIF if I want to do images with animations. So how do we fetch this data? There's this URL, which you can basically use as an endpoint. So you just fetch with any, I don't know, I think I use DIO for this. So yeah, you can just fetch the data and you get raw Markdown, which here is formatted, but that's the idea, it's just text, right? So how do we go and transform this into something that is a bit more beautiful to see? So there's some pre-processing involved. I do realize that the code probably looks a bit small from far away, but maybe I'll try to explain it. So what I've done here is to create an extension method on the string class, which is used to clean up the Markdown. So after I fetch the data, I run a bunch of regex expressions, which get rid of things like tables, dividers, and certain other patterns that I don't want to show in the UI. And then, yeah, just concatenate all these regexes and get a cleaned up string, if that makes sense. Now, before you overestimate widely my intelligence, if there is one thing that AI and LLMs are good at, I think we can agree is working with regex. So little prompt, tell it what to do, result, test it, works, okay, all good. So that wasn't me. Yeah, good. Next, so pre-processing. So I wanted to show this side by side just to kind of show visually what the differences are. So on the left is what is rendered on the GitHub web page UI. And on the right is the mobile app. So on the left side, there's some stuff at the bottom, which is what I was showing earlier. There's like a little table for navigation, which is ugly. And there's no need for that on the mobile version because navigation is built in. So yeah, the result of the processing step is that I can remove Markdown stuff that I don't want in the final UI. Caching and storage. So like I said, I wanted to be offline first. I mean, when I started off, I thought it might be useful maybe to run some queries. So I wanted to, at least I thought it might be a good idea to go for some kind of relational database. And I picked Drift and SQLite for building this. And to be fair, I mean, the app is pretty simple, and I could have just as easily have done it with a NoSQL database, but I think it was a good opportunity for me to actually learn how to use Drift and SQLite. So I was quite happy to learn that. So how does the caching work? Well, before deciding on a caching strategy, I think I need to be clear on what the requirements are. And this is not a real-time app where you have 100 chat messages every 5 minutes. This is me in my own office creating tips, maybe sharing 1 or 2 a week if it's a good week. So there doesn't need to be, I mean, this is basically factoring into the caching strategy. Like I don't create tips frequently. I rarely update the old ones. And so for that, I think if I want to make the app work offline, I think it was fine to choose some kind of caching validation strategy with like 7 days. So you download a tip, it's there for 7 days, it might get deleted afterwards, but it's there for 7 days. And even if the server has something new, it's kind of unlikely that it does because I don't write tips very often. So that's the idea. And how does this look with code? So this is an implementation using Riverpod, but you can even forget the Riverpod part. Just imagine that it's a function that returns a future. And so the idea is, I extract the tip number, which I can then use to index my database. That will give me the Markdown string that I can then render. Before I return anything, I just check. Sorry, Markdown tip there is a record, but never mind. So the idea is I check when it was last downloaded. And if it's more than 7 days old, I then refetch it from the server, but I still return the one that I got from the database. And that works okay, because since the UI is such that you can swipe left and right, like it might be a case that you swipe, you get an old tip, then the server fetch kicks in, and by the time you come back, you get out of it and back in again, then it's updated from the server. To be fair, maybe an extra caveat is that I've also later added pull to refresh, so you can actually force refresh to get an updated tip. But it's pretty basic. So that's caching Markdown. What about images? There's a package for that, so it's got some issues, that package, but for my purposes, it was good enough. Some issues in that. One problem I discovered here is that due to the way it's implemented internally, it basically unconditionally will delete images after it determines that they are expired. So if you're out in the woods, but you've only used the app 1 week ago and you want to check the tip that you downloaded 1 week ago, probably you get an empty box because cache net. So it's not my fault. It's cache network image, right? Right. I'm gonna at some point fix it, but priorities, life takes on. So one day I will implement the image downloading layer myself and fix it properly. Rendering. So how do you render an image? So Markdown package just gives you a couple of callbacks that you can plug into. So one thing I haven't mentioned is if you have links, so those are open with the external browser. So if you detect one of those, you can use on-top link callback. And from that, you can parse the URL, and then you can use URL launcher to kind of launch it. And then you get a web browser inside the app. For the image, what I do is return a custom cache network image, which is what I use just for the rendering. But also added a gesture detector, so I can detect if people tap on it, and when they do, I show image viewer. Yeah, I think it's called the image viewer, which gives you the pinch and zoom thing. So I mean, that's so simple that it fits on one slide, literally. So the rendering side of things is pretty easy. And the only other thing I didn't mention is there's a style sheet that you can configure. So if you do some very basic customization for, like, I don't know, inline code and maybe headings and things like that, you have a little bit of customization that is given to you by the library. So that kind of covers how the app works. And like I said, yeah, GitHub as a data source. So yes. So and there is one thing that I should have mentioned, and that is that when you pull any kind of resource from GitHub, you can, if you do just a standard HTTP request, you are rate limited to 60 requests per hour, and after that you get 4 to 9 error code, maybe that's the right one. So it means you are rate limited. So if you have an app with heavy users, I guess, that could become a problem. And especially because of the way UI is built, like you can literally swipe pretty quickly. So it's easy to exceed 60 requests in 1 hour. So what's the alternative? Apparently, you can use a personal access token to make authenticated API requests. And if you do that, you can do up to 5,000 requests per hour. But there are not 5,000 requests per user. There are 5,000 requests for all users because they are sharing the same access token that is part of the client app. It turns out that that's actually enough for my use case. So that tells you about what level of scale my app really has. How does it work in practice? So if you go on the settings, you can create a personal access token. What is nice is that you can scope it to a specific repository, and then you can tell it, just use it to read access only. So you can use scopes to limit what the token can do just to the things that you're going to do with it. One limitation is that it expires every year, so you had to generate a new token and find a way to update that in the app, right? So how do we do that? At the moment, the token is hard-coded. So comes March 25th, which is next month, I need to remember, so if you see a bunch of 4 to 9 errors, ping me because I've forgotten so I need to make an app update. And the way that works is with, at the moment, force upgrade and remote config. So I can just set a flag remotely and it will tell the app to update itself. This is how I thought of implementing it initially. Another way to do it, I guess, could have been to store the token itself in remote config. I'm not sure if it's best practice or if you should be storing API tokens in remote config, maybe not. Either way, neither approach is really secure because, neither approach is really secure because either way, you're storing the token on the client. It's transmitted every time you make a network request to GitHub. So if someone hacks my app, they might be able to get the token, and yeah, not a big deal. I mean, it's no financial app stuff, so this is fine. To that point, though, I think it's worth thinking about maybe an alternative approach. So like I said, everything is rendered on the client. Could I have done it differently, and what benefit would I have got out of it? So if we think of an architecture where it's server and client, I can then say I'm going to run a server which fetches the data from GitHub, does the pre-processing and storage, saves it to a remote database, and then I create an API that the client app can talk to. And that way, none of the formatting or pre-processing logic lives in the app anymore. The app just becomes a dumb UI that talks to the API and just fetches the data and shows it. One advantage of that is that it would probably become easier to implement real-time updates if I implement it in such a way on the server. And also that way I get around the access token limitations much more easily because it's all managed on the server. I don't need to do a separate app update for that. But again, like sometimes simplicity, it's like when it's good enough, it's good enough. And for this kind of project, all on the client is OK. So preparing for release. Let's talk about all these different things. So force update, automated testing, error monitoring, analytics, in-app review prompt. There's a tip about the app review prompt that I'm quite keen to show you. And website templates, yes. I mean, some of it is standard stuff. Some other things are maybe a bit more interesting, but I'll just go through it anyway. So force upgrade, again, this is also something that kind of fits in one slide. Maybe I removed some stuff, but the idea is I'm gonna store the required version in Firebase remote config. Then I can use the package info plus package to get the current app version. When the app starts, I'm going to compare them. And then if the required version is higher than the currently installed app version, then I show a force update pop-up, and then users are forced to update the app. It's kind of a useful feature, except that, and this is actually the use case for that is actually I need to remember to update the actions token on GitHub. Now, one problem is that sometimes you write this and you think, oh, this is fine, yeah, it will be all right. And then you forget the actual code for launching the App Store as a big to-do there to say that you shouldn't really be redirecting to com.example.myapp or ID 12345. And this is what happens, one, when you use ChatGPT, and two, even if you add to-dos and you don't then follow up to them, then you end up with this. So my initial launch was kind of useless from that point of view. Luckily, after 1 year, I can imagine that most people have gone past version 1, and so it won't affect more than 1 or 2 users in production, I hope. I don't know, let's see what the reaction to this is. Okay. Yeah, you know, it's a hobby project, so life is short, and you know, one of those things. But again, this is not a financial app, so. All right, go ahead. Yeah. Cool. Take very serious enterprise advice from me there. So the caveat is I didn't write any tests, but I did add error monitoring, which I think is super important. And it's such an easy thing to do, and you get a lot of value from it. In fact, pretty much immediately, like I did some testing myself, but once users really start using the app, then you see what things end up breaking. And I mean, it wasn't too bad. Like I've forgotten to configure URL launcher query intent on the Android manifest file, which basically causes all URL links to not open on Android. So that was caught right away by Sentry. Some large images were not loading, which I guess if you're in the middle of the woods and you have a 3G connection, that can happen. You get an error with that. Sometimes the Markdown was pointing to the incorrect image path. So then, again, that turns into an error. And it's just good to have some error monitoring solution there. Like without user intervention, I can see the things that are going wrong and I can fix them right away. So it's a no-brainer. For experimentation purposes, I run both Sentry and Crashlytics. I'm a pretty big fan of Sentry, if I'm honest. It has more advanced reporting, does more things. It's just nicer, personally. Though it's not free, like you get up to 5,000 errors on the free plan, which doesn't even sound too bad. But if your app starts to have a lot of Flutter layout errors, which could happen on every single frame, you get to 5,000 pretty quickly. So just something to be aware of, right? Didn't happen to me. Lucky. So my layouts are perfect. What are you talking about? Analytics. So I like to compare things, actually. So I also installed Firebase Analytics and Mixpanel. I think at some point I was trying Postdoc as well, and I can't remember what I didn't do with that. But anyway, both pretty decent if you're just interested in basic stuff. Though I think I do prefer Mixpanel when it comes to customization, because you have so many toggles and switches with it that you can create custom reports. It's quite nice, actually. And that's good for things like analyzing active users, engagement, retention. Some of these metrics you also get for free from the App Store if you go on App Store Connect. So that's not maybe the killer feature for those packages, but what you can do that you can't do with the App Store is tracking custom events. So every app is unique, and so if there are certain things that you want to track specifically, then you need some kind of analytics SDK to track those. And so for that, it's kind of useful to have some kind of analytics SDK. In fact, the kind of key performance indicators that I was interested about are how many tip liked events do I get in the app? What are the most liked tips? And what is the total likes count per user? And the last one in particular, I'm going to tell you in a couple of minutes why I like that one. But yeah, in order to track that, so generally when you want to track an event, it's just track with event name, and like you can pass some properties to it. So for tracking the last one, I was using shared preferences to just keep track of how many tips each user likes. And so whenever a tip is liked, I also send that information along when I make the call to the analytics SDK. So what can I do with this stuff? You can do basic things. So for example, if I want to count total events, I just go Mixpanel and see that on the 22nd of April last year, there were 267 events. Yay, good day. But you can do more interesting stuff too. So for example, if you want to see what is the maximum number of user total likes per user for the 75th and 90th percentile, that's something that you can do. It's actually really easy with Mixpanel. And what do I do with that information? Well, one thing that most apps need to do, but they don't need to do, but if you do it nicely, it can help your ratings, is to show this in-app rating prompt, right? But you can't show it as soon as you download the app, because that's annoying. And you can't show it too late, otherwise people are never going to see it. So what do? You go back to analytics, you crunch all the numbers, and this is basically going to tell you how many tips do the most engaged users like. And then you go back, crunch some more numbers, and come up with some super clever algorithm that uses well, look, it's clever. Look, exponential back off, right? So you base all these constants based on the data that you get from the analytics, and that gives you a better timing for showing the app prompt. To be honest, that's the only approach that I used. I mean, I'm happy with the reviews that I'll show you later. Maybe I could have done better, but I think that's a good tip. That I guess for certain use cases, it's a valid approach for showing the in-app review prompt. Website template. Well, if you already know what you want to use, then fine, you just use it. If you need to do the research, then you end up with a bunch of, like there's all those marketplace things where you can download all the landing page templates, and then there's never one that kind of ticks all the boxes. But I did find one on GitHub that I was quite happy with, because you just enter some configuration in some config YAML file, add a couple of screenshots, and there you go, landing page done. So that one is pretty good. You can host it on GitHub Pages. You can attach a custom domain if you want. That was literally less than 2 hours of work. It was good enough. I like good enough. CI/CD. I mean, CodeMagic is pretty easy to use. Like that also took maybe half an hour or something like that to set it up. Good things to say, but I think the main takeaway, not necessarily about which kind of CI system to use, is more about that you should have a CI system in place. Because if you make a lot of releases, that just end up saving you a lot of time. So yeah, automate your builds. So that's kind of the roundup about the things that I wanted to cover. One thing I didn't talk about is Shorebird, which I just added a couple of weeks ago. I still haven't used it extensively enough to add it to the slides, but that's pretty good stuff. Check it out as well. Yes, so how did I go about launching the app? So my idea was to launch on iOS first, which is where I don't own my device, since testing, sorry, and at home I don't have any Android devices. So I went for beta testing, and since I have a lot of followers, I can just say, hey, there's a link. Do you mind trying the app? And so that's how I go. I guess the initial feedback, and I discovered the first bugs on Android before going live. So that was a good idea. Also, it's nice to establish an early conversation with your users, and some of them will actually take the time to write a pretty long list of things that they would like to be improved in the app, and actually that's very helpful to hear. I guess Sentry gives you all the quantitative data about what's wrong or things that you can fix without your users having to complain about it. But yeah, stuff like this is also nice, and then you can get a lot out of it and you can improve the app. And what makes it easier to collect this is the user feedback package. So it's just a simple thing that you install, you add it as the root widget of your app, and then you just put it in the settings, and that way people can take screenshots, add annotations, and what's nice is that it has a Sentry integration, so once they submit, it's automatically filed as a user feedback entry in Sentry, and then I can just read it and take action on that. So how did the launch go? So as of today, I think we're about 10 months in since I launched the app initially. I think I'm about, close to 7,000 downloads between the two stores. Reviews have been, pretty good. Like, people seem to like the app, and I've been, after launch, I've been doing a lot of small releases, like small improvements, and I think they all add up over time. And generally people feel that it's being kept up to date and it's improving. So I'm happy with that. Again, how much effort for a side project should I put into user acquisition and all of that stuff? Well, I mean, obviously at the beginning I was a bit more active about it on social media, just announcing it and kind of saying, hey, if you want to download it, here it is. And then after that, naturally, downloads go down. But after a little while, I started noticing that organic App Store search went up. And the reason for that is I actually did spend a bit of time doing ASO. So there's a tool called Try Astro for iOS. So you can basically install it, you add your app listing, and then you can start experimenting with keywords. And then it's going to tell you how popular they are and how difficult they are to rank for. So when I started, I wanted to rank for Flutter tips, Flutter tricks, and then let's just throw some other common words that are involved with the Flutter ecosystem in there, just to see if I get some downloads that way. But the thing with that is that, like, you can see popularity is pretty low for all those terms, so I wasn't really getting much search traffic from it. But after a little while, it actually started ranking for the actual keyword Flutter, and so now if you type that in on the App Store, you probably get it within the first 10 results. So that's quite good. Other things that you can do to help that is spend a bit of time making the screenshots a bit nicer. Again, I'm not a designer. I can probably do even better than that, but I think this is better than nothing. And so overall, I'm happy to report that the launch went smoothly until it didn't, because the very joyous folks of the Play Store team sometimes like to complain. So I'm just going to read it, because your app has been removed due to the policy issues listed below. And violation of impersonation policy. So I guess I was pretending to be someone I'm not, which is very cryptic. And in the beginning, I'm like, who am I impersonating here? And then you kind of start digging into the Flutter review guidelines, and it's like, yeah, you shouldn't, like, so like, I'll just cut it short. Like, literally, you can't use a logo that is too similar to the Flutter logo, even though there's other thousands of apps that have been approved with it. Obviously, the logos are nearly identical, so of course they would complain about it. Also, I'm not sure if this made a difference or not, but this is a trademarked kind of name, so maybe you should use the TM symbol when you use it. The Android listing still has Flutter TM tips on the Google Play Store listing, and I guess that's what it took to make it pass review. So what was annoying about this is that you don't get a warning. They just remove your app. You get the notification, then you have to work with them to restore it. So you basically offline for a few days until you get it resolved. So yeah, just something to keep in mind. Probably doesn't apply to all apps, but when it does, like, your app gets removed, and that's not nice. So takeaways. So yeah, takeaways specifically for this project. I found that GitHub is great for a great CMS for Markdown content. Markdown itself is pretty great if you do simple things, and does the job. Flutter Markdown, that's also one of those packages that is becoming discontinued, but I think it's feature complete, so to be honest, I'm not complaining. Even though the customization options are a bit limited. And yeah, there are some limitations. So the Markdown content, if you use that widget, is not selectable. I tried to wrap it with, don't remember how the widget is called, but then I was getting a bunch of errors, so couldn't make it work. I think the app is nicer on mobile than it is on web, but you know, I guess if I wanted to really make it a very nice web experience, I probably would have gone with something like Astro or something more like web native. But still, it's okay. Really happy with Drift, the way it works, cross-platform, nice. And yeah, I'm gonna wrap up with some lessons that I learned. I should say that those strategies might work better for indie devs than they might do for enterprises, but still, yeah, focus on one core problem, and then just make it lovable product and ship that. And then you can start getting feedback, and then you can iterate on that. So I think that's a good way to go. Factor in the time that it takes for the App Store submissions, the listing, the screenshots, the icons, landing page, all of that stuff, privacy policy, terms and Cs. There's a long list of stuff. Automate the app releases as soon as possible. My rule of thumb is as soon as you make your second release, you go to have CI/CD. And on that topic, make small releases. It just makes your life easier. It's easier to iterate. You don't introduce massive regressions, so it's good. And to keep a check on that, yeah, instrument your app. So add analytics, monitoring, in-app user feedback, all of that. I mean, for bigger projects, of course, you want to have automated testing and all that. But for smaller stuff, I think those are still kind of critical, and they guide you through resolving issues and kind of improving the app in an automated way, at least. Also, yeah, multiple flavors. I mean, especially if you have a backend, I think it's quite important to have that, so you don't kind of mix staging and production data. I think it's just a good rule to follow. Yeah, write integration tests. Be careful about the app trademarks and all the, I mean, Google Play has, I don't know how many, dozens of pages about things you can or should not do, but yeah, just be careful about some of that. And I think that wraps up my presentation. I don't even know how I'm doing on time, but I hope you've had a good time. Yeah.